This 53-man roster is by no means set in stone. Teams can begin setting their practice squad, 24 hours from now, tomorrow afternoon, which consists of 16 players. 10 of those have to have at least or less than 2 years of accrued NFL experience. And then after that, you figure we have about a week and a half before the first regular season game. There's plenty of time for teams to make moves. There are going to be players that are kept, Saints or otherwise, kept because of injury reasons, that are going to be put on the PUP list or short-term injured reserve over the next couple of days. Options that teams didn't have with those players before tomorrow. That'll open up roster spaces. We'll talk about a couple of those players too, and. A couple fan favorites. Traquan Smith, still a Saint. Zach Bond, still a Saint. In fact, I've decided I'm going to start calling Zach Traquan Bond because he is he's the defensive version of Traquan Smith. But again, I mean, we'll get into those. I still think that this team has a strong roster. Dennis Allen, obviously, by the moves today anyway, is putting an emphasis on special teams and veteran leadership.
Yeah, he is. I agree with that. I thought that was all the moves he was making all this season too. It's all about veteran leadership. It's about getting strong voices in the locker room, getting things settled, and he went with a lot of veteran guys. Now, one of the biggest surprises of the cuts, I guess, was Jalen Smith getting cut, who you and I both felt he was the third best linebacker on the team. Zach Bond sticks with him, sticks with the roster, but there's a method to this madness, which I think, and I think you and I both agree on this. The reason why you could cut a guy like Jalen Smith as opposed to a Zach Bond or as opposed to a Sewell or one of those other linebackers or even DeMarco Jackson. There's no waiver process for Jalen Smith. You can bring him back the next day, and no doubt I feel they had the conversation with him. Listen, we've got some roster moves to make. Got to put some guys in IR. Once we get those moves we'll have the roster spot to bring you back, and everything's kosher again. So I think that's the reason behind that, because the Jets cut Thomas Morstead today. Jets have no punter. There's no way they're going without a punter, and I don't think Morstead lost his job. I don't think Gillikin's going up to the Jets. So.
And you do make a great point about Jalen Smith and other veterans that have been in the league a few years, but you're still taking an awful big gamble, because they might have had the conversation with Jalen, and Jalen may have said, I'll turn my phone off, I won't leave town, this is where you can reach me, but that still doesn't prevent other teams from calling. Hey Jalen, how much are you making with New Orleans? We'll give you more. How much playing time are you projected to get with the Saints? You'll have a better opportunity here. Those kind of things. And since Jalen is now out there, along with a couple other intriguing names, there's nothing to prevent that from happening. So, to me, if you have your player that you want, you do everything that you can to keep him in the building. And that's where Dennis Allen has taken an awful big gamble. But like you said, he's not the only coach that's ever done this. He's not the only coach that was doing this today. So we'll wait. We'll keep our fingers crossed over the next, I'd say 36 to 48 hours. We'll be able to tell whether Jalen Smith will be a New Orleans Saint again.
Right. I mean, I expect at least 3 names get put on IR between now and Wednesday or Thursday. I expect Landon Young to be put on IR. I expect probably Kirk Merritt to be put on IR. And I expect our favorite player, Traquan Smith, to be put on IR. Just because if you put them on IR before the final 53, they're gone for the year.
Yeah.
If you put them on IR after the 53 has been set, you have the opportunity to bring these guys back. Now, do you really want to bring Traquan Smith back? I don't know, but a guy like Landon Young, yeah, you'd like to bring him back because you have problems already with your offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's I can see the logic behind that, and it's difficult to make those choices. I don't know why it's doing this. It's difficult to make these choices because what other vets are you going to cut? Do you take the gamble and cut an Andres Pete, for example?
Right.
If someone grabs him, you take a big cap hit. Yep. That's a financial consideration. They made the unusual move of trading Wil Lutz to the Denver Broncos, which will now be referred to by me as New Orleans West. For those of you who grew up like I did in the Bum Phillips era, Bob Rosler, who was a columnist for the Times-Picayune, used to refer to the New Orleans Saints under Bum as Houston East because he kept bringing in Oilers players. Every time you turn around, we're making a trade or signing an ex-Oiler. Traded Archie Manning for Leon Gray, Tim Wilson. Sean Payton has kind of become like Bum and is bringing back ex-Saints players onto his roster constantly. I don't know how much of that everyone heard. My video feed kept jumping out. But yeah, he kept bringing back ex-Oiler players to the Saints. Well, Payton is bringing back ex-Saints players to the Broncos. Let's talk about those moves, for example. Wil Lutz, Blake Grupe beat out Wil Lutz. Wil Lutz got traded to the Houston Oilers. I knew I was going to do it at least once. The Denver Broncos, New Orleans West. That orange team from the New Orleans West team. How do you feel about that move? I mean, to me, that's a big risk. We're talking about veteran leadership, and here you went with a young kicker.
That went the polar opposite of how Dennis Allen filled out the rest of his second New Orleans Saints team. And it makes me a little sad because Wil Lutz will be in the New Orleans Saints Hall of Fame someday. At least he should be. He leaves New Orleans second in franchise history in points scored, second in extra points converted, behind only Hall of Famer Morton Anderson, and third in field goals converted behind Anderson, and John Carney. And I know that Saints fans are angry at Sean Payton. You shouldn't be. Sean's trying to fill out his roster. He badly needed a kicker, and Wil Lutz is one of the best. I saw the logic behind the move, though. Lutz had a fantastic training camp, a terrific preseason. But Grupe had a fantastic training camp and a terrific preseason. I thought for sure that Grupe would come down with a sudden and mysterious injury so the team could stash him on IR and let Lutz play out the final year of his contract, which is this year. New Orleans saw it differently. They saw the opportunity to get something in return for Lutz. In this case, it was a 7th-round draft choice from Denver, while going with a guy that they had a lot of confidence in. But we have seen this scenario play out in the league a lot of times throughout history, where you have an established veteran kicker and a rookie who matches him stroke for stroke in training camp and practice when the games don't count. You make the move to get rid of that veteran kicker, go cheaper, go younger with a newer guy, where you have him under a rookie contract for the next 3 years, and the guy turns out to fold under pressure time and time again. I like Groupie. I like what I saw from Groupie. So I hope I'm wrong. I'm not saying whether I'm right or wrong. I hope that history doesn't repeat itself on that end of the spectrum. I would love to see Wil Lutz kick Sean Payton to an AFC championship, not a Super Bowl win, but an AFC championship. But and I can see why they're keeping Groupie, but again, it's an awful big risk. And if you're a nostalgic guy or a guy that roots for individual players, Wil Lutz is a very easy guy to root for. So I could see why a portion of the fan base is a little bit upset right now.
Yeah, it's a difficult decision because you look at a guy like Lutz, and as I was telling you off the air before we got started, it's the fastest 7 years I can remember because it feels like Lutz just got here. And I know Anna's talking about, that's all we got was a seventh rounder. Remember, he was an undrafted free agent at one time, too.
Right, and he's a kicker.
We got him off. Yeah, we got him from Baltimore. He was the other guy in Baltimore. So, you're not going to get a whole lot for him. Seventh round is about what you're going to get, and probably Denver's going to be picking in the upper half of the seventh round. So it's not a terrible pick. It's worth more than what you got for Bradley Roby, and we'll talk about Roby in a minute. But, I like the move because it's aggressive. You're gambling on the younger kicker who has a larger upside than Lutz has had. Lutz, over the past 3 seasons, has either had injuries or has had these slumps at critical points in the season. It's funny, when we were talking about, and that's a 2022 highlight film behind us. We were talking about Lutz, and they're showing a Minnesota game where he kicked a 60-yarder, and then he also doinked the 63-yarder, I think it was, that could have tied the game. That was the high point of his season, though. From the rest of that point on, you had a lot of question marks about Lutz. There were fans last year who were really aggravated and wanted Lutz gone. I rewatched the Houston game. I rewatched the other 2 preseason games where he had opportunities to kick. One of the things I like about him versus Lutz, and we saw this a few times early in Lutz's career as a Saint, that ball comes off his foot high. Remember when Lutz was getting kicks blocked in the very beginning where he wasn't... he had 3 of them blocked. He was not getting enough air under the ball when it would leave his foot. That 60-yarder was really, really high. And that's really hard to do when you're kicking for distance because it's about you're trying to get distance out of it, so you're trying to get less of an arc to the ball, to the goal than you would on a chip shot. And where was Lutz having the most trouble in the past 3 seasons? He was having trouble from 39 to 49 yards, that range. He was good in extra points, but he was having trouble in, I guess I'm going to call it the Morton Anderson zone because that's who used to be automatic. Morton, when he got close, sometimes he had some issues. When he got outside 40, 45, 47 yards, he had issues. But, man, 20 to about 45, 47 yards, Morton was money. And that's really where, because of the rules today, that's really where the kickers have to make their living is between that 39 and 49-yard range. And you got a kid that is hitting these balls so high and with plenty of leg strength that it's a good thing. I can see why the team went his direction. Yeah, there's money involved, and he's cheap. I made a joke because he had gotten chased off the field after kicking the game winner against Kansas City by Saints security who thought he was a fan. I made a joke on Twitter, said, listen, this is our kicker now, and I put his picture on Twitter. So this is our kicker now. Let him on the field, let him in the locker room, and for God's sake, don't tow his 2012 Kia Sorento from from the players' parking lot because you don't think it belongs there with all the Lambos and the all the expensive the Porsches and all the expensive cars. This is a cheap kicker, so it's. I'm excited about this. I'm a little nervous. I'm going to feel better after the first couple of games, probably, but I understand the logic. He is. He's probably they've had some small ones, but he's probably about the smallest kicker we've had since Garrow, and Garrow was a kicker in 1979. I just can't get over how young he looks too, and it's beyond the fact that I'm old. He looks like he's 12. I swear. Right. Especially he puts that hat on backwards. He looks like a 12-year-old. Let's talk about Gilikin then, because this was a battle, a kicking battle, which I think we didn't have a winner. No. Because I don't think Lou Hedley really won the job, in so much as they're like, all right, we saw this shit last year with Gilikin, and we're not going to go through this again. We're going to try somebody else.
Alan, this one confused me a little bit. I could, even though I thought Lutz was going to make the team, even though I thought Lutz was going to be their choice, I can understand and support the choice of Groupie. But Gilikin versus Hedley, like you said, there was no winner. There was less of a loser. Neither punter was consistent in either preseason, games or the practices, because I specifically talked to both Ross Jackson and John Hendricks, who were there at a lot of the camps, training camp practices in person, and they said the same thing. So they confirmed what I was saying too, what we're all saying. But still, I thought Gilikin, at least in the games, was a little bit more consistent than Hedley. Maybe not drastically so, but I thought for sure that they would stay with the experience and what they knew, that the devil as the saying goes. You can't even, in Groupie's case, you could say, Groupie has 5 or 6 years of youth on his side. Hedley is actually older than Gilikin. So I don't know what to make about this move. Unless they think that they tried to trade Gilikin, no takers, so they released him. If he doesn't get picked up on waivers, you might see Gilikin come back to the practice squad, because they can't feel entirely confident in Lou Hedley. Obviously they didn't feel confident in Gilikin. That's why they made the move. Whether it's Gilikin or another veteran punter, you might see. I fully expect the Saints to add at least one punter to their practice squad here.
Yeah, I think they are scouting the waiver wire, and I agree with you. Seeing John Butler, I'm like, go get Morstead, freak the Jets out.
Yeah,
go take Morstead from them. Because Morstead's even saying, hey, I'm going to be fine. This is just procedure. I've gone through this before. You can't wear 6 because May is taking your number 6. But, man, you can go put on 16. I think that number is available. But, I really would – I'm not comfortable at all with this move. And it's not – and I don't think Gilikin is that consistent of a punter. In fact, he was very frustrating. But – yeah, this was the best of a loser battle, whereas, like you said, Lutz and Groupie were like, okay, these are 2 good kickers. They're both going to be kicking in the league. It's a tough call, but we're going to go with the younger guy. Yeah, this is just like, I don't know, trying to decide between let me think of a recent comparison. We're trying to decide between
Billy Joe Hobart and Billy Joe Tolliver.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Good comparison. I was thinking Crawley and someone like that. It just, but yeah, Crawley or Fred Thomas. Who do you want to go with in this case? But yeah, it's just it's the two Billy Joes, and I'm disappointed that they couldn't get this really straight. Yeah, they want somebody because the kicking rules are changing too. That's the other thing we need to keep in mind.
Yeah.
They talked about this on the national broadcast Sunday night, and they've talked about it on the Saints broadcast of the preseason games. But there's a real emphasis right now to cut down on returns. They want to encourage teams to either kick the ball out the end zone or kick it where there's really no return. And eventually you get to the point where you're not going to have a punter. You can have a place kicker, but they're not going to have a punter. There won't be a kickoff anymore. I can see that coming in the future because
Sure.
I think it was during a national broadcast. They talked about setting the teams up to go in, start the ball at certain positions in the field, 25-yard line, 35-yard line, whatever it is, to start a drive. They're floating that idea out there, and I can see that play coming. So, it's going to be tough to deal with. That's not right. But yeah, anyway. So let's talk about the other guy that they were trying to trade, Roby. This was a bit of a surprise because you really don't have a nickel back. You've got some guys who can play nickel, but Bradley Roby, most people thought was going to be a guy that was going to make the roster, be available, but he wasn't. So why do you think they cut Bradley Roby?
Well, and you kind of hinted at this a second ago. We were hearing reports early this morning, that they were fielding trade calls for Bradley Roby, and probably a couple other players too. I mean, that's just what happens in the National Football League. And Roby was actually one of those players clear back before minicamp. That myself and some others suggested, hey, if the Saints trade any of their veterans, keep an eye on Roby and a handful of other ones. I think ultimately they either obviously they couldn't work out any kind of trade for Roby, so they obviously released him. They had been working out Alontae Taylor in the slot.
Mm-hmm.
The reasoning is that they want to have Alontae and Paulson Adebo on the field together with Marshawn Lattimore as much as possible. And that's football 101. You want your talented guys on the field. Alontae was having some struggles there. I mean, there's going to be some growing pains there. But it's also clear that by releasing Bradley Roby, that Dennis Allen and Joe Woods said, you know what, we'll deal with the growing pains from Alontae Taylor because, as you pointed out, Alan, we have a couple other guys that can play the slot if he's really that bad. You have Ugo Amadi, Lonnie Johnson, Jordan Howden, even Tyrann Mathieu, all capable of playing the slot. So you have some options there. They aren't ideal necessarily, but you have a secondary that's still very interchangeable. So they saw the opportunity to move on from Roby. It was still a head scratcher to me because you move on from Roby, but you keep Isaac Yiadom, who was an absolute sieve in coverage all preseason. But again, this is a move with one thing in mind: special teams. Roby can play special teams and has, but Yiadom is a potential special teams ace. And that's why they went this direction here, because again they felt like, okay, we're not going to necessarily play Isaac in our nickel or dime defense, but we want him on special teams. We have Alontae that we want to work into the slot, and even if that doesn't work out, again, you have the fallback option of Amadi, Lonnie Johnson, Jordan Howden, or even Tyrann Mathieu if they absolutely had to. So I think that they saw the ability to have a more versatile defensive backfield without Bradley Roby rather than with him.
And that's where I think this was too. I mean, there were some finances involved.
Yeah.
Bradley Roby had some money coming to him, but I do think that they made some decisions based off of we're getting younger, and I think the average age. I think Jeff Duncan posted this. The average age of the Saints roster last year was almost 29 years old, and they've shaved 2 years off of it, making them not the youngest team, but one of the younger teams out there. Because they parted ways with so many veterans over the past few years. Mark Ingram just retired, and Lutz is getting up there in age. That kind of stuff. I mean, you don't have what's his name? Just on Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton's not on the team anymore. So you've gotten younger in a lot of positions. So I'm a little surprised by it, but I think that they just feel like we know Alontae Taylor can play the outside better than Roby can if someone gets hurt. We want to make him play the inside. But we don't need to have him play every down from the inside. We can use him more on so-called running downs or run option downs. Whereas we might play somebody else on a passing down inside. Yeah, I agree with you. It gives him more flexibility because he is a better tackler than Roby was. I know a lot of fans were upset the fact that that the Saints didn't make the trade for him. I don't think they would have got much for him, honestly.
I doubt it.
They were saying, well, we paid a 3 and a 6 to get him. Yeah, you did that 3 years ago. And that was during the season when you needed a guy.
Yeah.
It wasn't on cut down day. And he's 3 years older now. So it's a much harder sell now, especially with teams are hoarding draft picks. And I think they also kind of did him a solid because they're like, okay, listen, we can send you to Tampa. We can send you to, Chicago, Arizona, the Rams, teams that you probably don't want to play for. The Texans again, teams you probably don't want to play for. Or we can release you, and you can go try and hook up with a team like, say, Jacksonville, or you won't be in Philadelphia, but, Detroit, or somebody who you feel like is an up-and-coming team you've got a shot with. So I just feel like that was out of respect for him, that it wasn't personal, it was business, to quote a line from mobster movies. But it was just a decision they were going to have to make. All right, as you guys can no doubt tell, I've been playing Jimmy Graham highlights in the background because let me tell you something. Not only am I glad he made the team, but Sunday night was something special.
Yes.
And I'm putting these things up because this is from 2011. This was vintage Jimmy Graham that we saw, and I mean, that seems to be the word of the day, vintage Jimmy Graham. But it was nostalgia. It was so much nostalgia to see Jimmy Graham out there doing this kind of stuff, reaching up, getting the contested passes, ripping it out of somebody else's hands, standing over them, and like Muhammad Ali. I got it from you. I put you down. And then that touchdown was just classic Jimmy Graham, too, where, they put the ball, he just boxed the guy out, and boom, it's a touchdown. How did you feel about that? I mean, it's just 3 catches. And everybody's talking about Krull, Krull got 100 yards receiving. How come people don't talk about that? It's different.
It is. It is different. In my thumbs up, thumbs down article from the Texans game, Jimmy Graham got one of my 2 thumbs up, and on the touchdown catch, from Jameis Winston, I used the word quintessential Jimmy, and if you're a Saints fan, you had to love Sunday night. And I've gotten into, and Alan, I watch you on social media like you watch me. You've gotten into it with a lot of fans too. Uh, they can't seem to understand that the Saints do not need Jimmy Graham to be 2011 through 2014 Jimmy Graham. All they need from him is what they got Sunday night, a weapon
Mm-hmm.
that can be used on third downs. I mean, when you go five wide, uh, and your fifth wide can be a guy like Jimmy Graham. When you go to a three tight end set and your third tight end is Jimmy Graham, or when you're in the red zone and you bring a guy like Jimmy Graham in, yeah, he can't run like he used to. We're not going to see him hurdle guys. He's not that kind of athlete anymore. But he's still 6'7". He can still catch the football, and he uses his body like no other player when it comes to boxing out a defender or shielding a defender from a contested catch. Jimmy
Mm-hmm.
Graham is going to be a bona fide weapon for the New Orleans Saints, a situational weapon for the New Orleans Saints. And Lucas Krull, I know Krull had a solid preseason. Don't give me that BS that he's the next coming, great thing, because he missed as many plays as he made throughout the preseason. And as soon as Jimmy Graham was signed, let's face reality, Lucas Krull never stood a shot. I would like to see Krull be brought back to the practice squad because he is a nice athlete with some developmental skills. But if Jimmy Graham still had even a tiny bit in the tank, Lucas Krull never had a chance to make this team.
And part of what I've enjoyed so much is the fact that the way the crowd is responding to Graham
Mm-hmm.
being back with the team. It's like Marcus Colston coming back. It's like Pierre Thomas coming back. But the difference is those two guys, couldn't come back because they had nothing left. Graham has got a little left. He took a year off. He's actually getting. He said that year off has helped him get over some of the injuries he's had. But it's situational and it's nostalgia. If you just had Pierre Thomas available for one screen pass in a game, you would love it.
Yeah.
You would love it. Even if that play only got a first down, it's still a screen pass with Pierre Thomas, and you get to see that move one more time. And that's what it is. And it reminds him of, that's the 2011 season, having Graham as a reminder of those years when the Saints were just rolling teams. That's the other thing about Graham that, why people get so happy to see him. Because you're seeing that one more time.
Yeah.
And how many former Saints do not get that opportunity to come back one more time? Morton Anderson didn't get it. Joe Horn didn't get it. Of course, Colston never left, but, Pierre Thomas never really got that opportunity to come back. And I think that's why people, I've always said this about the fan base of New Orleans. We become attached to players unlike any other fan base out there. It's something about this city that we look at these players as you or us. And it's why we get pissed off. So many people get pissed off. They feel like you're being disrespectful to the team. If you leave in a bitter way or an angry way and you take shots at the team, people are like, all right, you're fucking dead to me.
Yeah.
To be crude. That's how they are. You're dead. So it's, and I don't think a lot of franchises have that kind of loyalty to players. Not like this. We've got a statue, and yeah, it symbolizes more than just the player. But, if you talk to people, the average Saints fan, outside of the block kick, can you tell me a play that Steve Gleason made as a Saints player? They wouldn't be able to tell you. They honestly wouldn't be able to tell you. It doesn't matter, though. He played for the Saints.
Mm-hmm.
And he was part of the most important play in Saints history, or one of the most important plays in Saints history. So that's how he became a legend for fans. He's Steve Gleason. He's a Saint. I'm all for it, and it's that to understand the Steve Gleason attachment, even if he wasn't going through ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, there would still be that attachment because he made that play, in the dome opener. He made that play. No, we're not bringing back Coby Fleener. Coby Fleener is from a because you also have to be in a critical play. Tracy Porter, yes. Coby Fleener, no. Sorry, it's just the way it goes. I don't write the rules. I just follow them. Did you get a chance to see the Who Dat chant? I know they were teasing a lot about it. It was Deuce. It was Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram was part of the broadcast for Fox.
Yeah.
And Deuce had on his 28. Ingram had 22 on, and Kamara had the 14 on.
Mm-hmm.
And all three of them came out together and did the Who Dat chant. I mean, that's special. Now, there's something I'd love to see, and you may remember this or not. Do you remember what John Riggins did when they retired his number for the Washington Redskins?
Yes, he did. Or yes, I do. What he did. I don't remember if it was a Sunday game or a Monday night game. But Riggins, as only Riggins can, he got dressed up in full uniform, helmet included. Well, he didn't put the helmet on, but he was carrying it. And he jogged out. Made his little speech, took a bow. John Riggins was a showman, if nothing else. I remember that well.
And Riggins said he wanted to hear that crowd one more time.
Yeah.
And I think if anybody had an opportunity to do that again, it would have to be this man here, Drew Brees. I think Drew Brees, complete with the stripe, the marks under his eyes, the black stuff under his eyes, come out there in full uniform one more time and just absorb the 70,000 people cheering you, because he did not get that opportunity when he left. Played his final game because it was a playoff game during COVID. But yeah, that's somebody I'd like to see, because as we look at Graham, as we look at talk about all these other players, that's the only other player I can see that had that kind of affection, that kind of love to come back out one more time if he could come back to the Saints. So yeah, I that's something I really would love to see. So yes, I love the Who Dat chant, Anna, but I would love to see Drew Brees come out for the Who Dat chant in full uniform like that. Maybe when they put his name in the ring, the Ring of Honor, because that's coming. They just got to pick the game, and it'll be a sellout as always.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be something special. Okay, so we talked about Roby. Any surprises, or I should say, any disappointments you had? You dropped a couple of names earlier, but any disappointments you said you're like, why did he make the roster?
Traquan Bond and Traquan Smith. But I mean, we've talked about those guys. I mentioned Isaac Yiadom. But again, that's for special teams purposes. It surprised me that Max Garcia made it. And I think that his hold on a roster spot has to be considered tenuous at best. We might see 3 new offensive linemen on this team before they kick off the season against Tennessee. I mean, the starting 5, we knew who they were going to be. We'll call them starting 6. Pete Hurst. I expected Nick Saldivari to hold on to his job because he's not played well. But they invested a 4th round pick. So you're talking about two other linemen, Landon Young, who we think might go on PUP, on pup or injured reserve. So they'll bring in another lineman, to fill that slot. And Garcia, I use the word abysmal and putrid numerous times when talking about Garcia specifically and the second and third string offensive line in general throughout all three preseason games. And and I'm not saying Garcia shouldn't have made it over this lineman or that lineman, Throckmorton, Evans, anybody else. None of them deserved a spot. So I'm only surprised to a point, because they had to have some linemen, but I consider Garcia and even Landon Young, I consider their jobs tenuous at best right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the offensive line, I agree with you. A lot of people thought that Andres Pete might get cut because, he didn't look good. Yeah, I agree with you on that. And not only that, it's not just money. It's also starting experience.
Yeah.
Nick Underhill has been saying that Pete's out of shape. He got hurt, and it got even more out of shape. Pete got demoted, but he's also probably the best of that backup offensive lineman. And if an injury were to happen to one of the tackles, whether it's Penning or Ramczyk, you can slide Hurst over to tackle and put Pete in at guard.
Right.
I don't think that's why a guy like Calvin Throckmorton was gone. That's why Jason Kidd was left out there as much as he was, because they were trying to see, is there anything that we can build on? Can he play tackle in a pinch that we don't have to move Hurst over? We can leave him there. And clearly he couldn't. Especially at left tackle, he was a turnstile. I was having Darryl Talley. Not Talley. What was his name? He was a turnstile Talley. I think it was that was his name. My nickname for him. Anyway, he was a tackle that replaced Willie Rofe in 2001 when Rofe got hurt, and he was just terrible. I mean, he couldn't block anything. And I looked at the waiver wire, and I really don't see any good linemen out there. Alex Leatherwood, who was a former first-round pick, I think of the Raiders, got cut by Detroit or someone. So, that was probably the only name I recognized out there. Most of the rest was just, it's basically the guys we have. So it's, if you're looking at offensive linemen throughout the league, a lot of teams are nervous about their line, that they see themselves one or two key linemen injured away from a disaster. Even a team like the Eagles. Last year, part of the reason why we beat the Eagles was because their offensive line was in shambles.
Right.
They got healthy for the playoffs, but they were in shambles.
Yeah, I mean, people get pissed, at the Saints because they draft an offensive lineman every year. It's reasons like this that teams have to draft an offensive lineman every year.
Yeah, absolutely. I said this a long time ago. Everybody wants a top 10 offensive or top 5 offensive line. They just don't want to draft a top 5 offensive line. They just want these guys to just show up and be great. And meanwhile, all we do is draft skill players or, stud defensive players. It's funny how Saints fans are, and I think Garcia made the team because, thank you. I knew Darryl Talley was on the Bills. Yeah, he was the one in the video. We're going to the show. Yeah, we're going to the show. From when they beat the Raiders in the AFC Championship game. But thank you, Darryl Terrell. I couldn't think. I knew it was two T's because I call him Turnstile Terrell. I just couldn't remember his last name, the right pronunciation of his last name. Thank you, John. Yeah, because he was awful. He really was. Yeah. You could have put a cardboard cutout of an offensive lineman who would have blocked defensive linemen better than Terrell did. But yeah, Garcia's there because they're going to put him at center as a backup center, without having to move Ruiz around.
Mhm.
Pete's there as a backup guard, and Landon Young is probably going to get put on IR with the idea he'll be a backup tackle eventually.
Mhm.
But I agree with you. I think we're going to have at least two, if not three, different offensive linemen come in off of waivers, and probably one or both of those got. Well, Pete will stick, but probably somebody else is going to end up on the practice squad because they need big, healthy bodies, and it's going to be you're going through the rummage sale right now. Um, Zach Bond, yeah, I'm kind of surprised he's still around. I don't know, except for to play the pass rushing skill. I just don't see why he's still around. He can't get the linebacker part down pat.
No.
He is a one trick guy who was very productive in college as a pass rusher, but he cannot play linebacker. He's a less talented version of Ronaldo Turnbull to an extent. Turnbull was a good pass rusher.
Yeah, Bond's not even that.
Yeah, right. Because Turnbull had size. Turnbull had the long arms and he had size. But Turnbull, that's all he could do was rush the passer. He couldn't play linebacker from the standpoint of couldn't drop in coverage, wasn't good on run support. So that's why they put him back on the defensive line, thinking, okay, we'll just put you as left end and let you rush the passer while teams started running at him, and that was it for him. The only other surprise I had was, and it's not really a surprise, but I guess what's happening with the running backs. I had Darrell Williams making the team only because I'm like, okay, you need a veteran to come in when Kamara gets suspended.
Right.
Might as well get him acclimated and learn the offense. Well, Darrell Williams didn't even play much in the offense. I don't think I saw him at all in the Texans game, and he played at the very end in the Chargers game.
Yep.
So he must have really looked bad in practice. Do you see them bringing in another running back, or do you see them trying to maybe bring back Merriweather in the practice squad, maybe activate him the week of the Tennessee game?
Alan, I see both happening. I think we'll see a couple running backs on the practice squad. I do ultimately think that you are right, that they are looking to bring in a veteran to at least start the year, behind Kendre Miller, behind Jamal Williams. Because, Jamal Williams is a veteran also, but it's his first year in the system. Kendre Miller's his first year in the system, and he's a rookie. You want a guy you want a guy that's played in the league for several years, and by the way, still has some football left, unlike a David Johnson or a Jordan Howard. But I still found it interesting that they didn't hang on to Ellis Merriweather, because Merriweather played awfully well in the preseason. It even showed some surprising receiving ability that I didn't know he had. I knew he was a good power runner, did not know he was that kind of receiver. So that I know people were more disappointed in Shaq Davis. I think Shaq you get back. Ellis, for practice squad. Ellis Merriweather, I'm not sure. Because again, you have a fairly versatile running back on young legs and a rookie contract. If I'm another team, I try to pounce on that relatively quickly. I don't know. Maybe you see the Saints revisit. Hey, Kareem Hunt, what's that say? What's that number you say you want it contractually? Maybe you look into some other running backs that were released. I didn't look heavily into the waiver wire.
I didn't either.
But yeah, I do think ultimately they'll have 2 or 3 more backs between practice squad, and hopefully a veteran, to start the year against Tennessee.
I was just thinking about this as we're talking. We're mentioning all these guys that let go and stuff. I don't know who's going to return kicks for this team.
That's the other thing.
If you're talking about having Rashid Shaheed be an integral part of the offense, basically being your number 2 receiver, maybe, probably 2, 3, somewhere around there, but at least be on the snaps for about 60 to 75% of the offensive snaps. You can't have him out there returning kicks and then going, okay, now you got to run a go route.
Right.
Lynn Bowden Jr. got let go. Shaq Davis, we talked about him already. I'm just looking down this list here of guys. John Trey Kirkland got let go. Merriweather got let go. I don't know who's going to be the kick returner. Is this what you're going to use Taysom Hill for in some plays?
You could. Kendre Miller has returned kicks a little bit, but again, we just got done talking about how concerned we are about the thin backfield for those first 3 weeks while Kamara is out. So I doubt you want to roll the dice with a Kendre Miller or even Taysom Hill there. I could still see Rashid Shaheed returning punts. But not kickoffs, that kind of scenario. But even if that plays out, again, you don't have an established kickoff returner right now.
Yeah. And I can remember there was we talked about this in the beginning of the show. You brought a lot of special teams guys in, but I don't see who the special teams returner is. Now, there was a time where the Saints would put out, Jarvis Bird, or they put, Malcolm Jenkins, or in days past, you put Gene Atkins back there because you want a guy who's going to field the ball and hold it, but he's not going to run the return. He's just going to do fair catches. I'm curious to see where this return is going to come from, because I thought Merriweather was the guy, or Kurt Merritt was going to be the guy who's going to return kicks. But we haven't seen that in the preseason. I have not been able to figure out who the preseason guy is. Lynn Bowden was the guy I saw on most of them. Here's some names that are out there. Kareem Hunt still available, not surprising. Myles Gaskin, Leonard Fournette. I think the Fournette thing, I don't think they're going to be looking at Fournette because Fournette's too limited for what they want to do. Myles Gaskin and Kareem Hunt, those are some names I could see them looking at because they're pass-catching backs, and that's what they want to have, is a guy who can not only pass block but also go out for the little wheel routes. So it's just an idea. They may bring back Merriweather. I don't know yet. I think they could even bring back Darrell Williams for all we know. Based on the lack of playing time he got in the preseason, I'm not sure. There's some questions I have on this team right now in the return game. Kickoffs are different. I can see Taysom Hill returning kicks and kickoffs. You can put Taysom Hill on one side, Rashid Shaheed on the other side. Let's see where they go from there. But in previous years, you always seem to have that one receiver who was returning kicks primarily. And the closest you got to that this year was Lynn Bowden, and he got let go. So I don't know. Maybe that's one of the moves they're going to make once the and there's the Texans game from last night. Maybe it's one of the moves they plan on making when once the waiver stuff has cleared and once they've got kind of the IRR's players put in. I don't know yet. But that I'm concerned about that right now. There was something else I wanted to ask you, and I just drew a blank on it. There was something that caught my eye on this list here of names, and I don't remember what it was now. Oh, yeah, I do remember. Okay. So, one of the names, we talked about Shaq Davis earlier. The defensive tackle who got 3 sacks in the Chargers game, kind of being a real disruptive force. They had people out there actually arguing that Nico Latos was one of the guys that probably should have made this team. we're looking at 9 defensive linemen.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you feel about this kid? I mean, I like him. I'm excited for him, but he wasn't making this team. It wasn't possible.
No, he wasn't making this team. And it's a shame. The only reason Nico Lawless did not have a shot to make this team is the numbers game. You're not cutting Cam Jordan, unless you pull off a surprise trade, and deal a Carl Granderson or a Tano Cassino. Those guys are underrated, have been underrated contributors. Peyton Turner, it looks like the light's finally coming on for him. As disruptive as Lawless was in the preseason, Turner was nearly as effective, and he was effective against first and second teamers. And Isaiah Foskey, second round rookie draft pick. You're not parting ways with him. So Lawless was just caught in the numbers game. You hope that that's a guy that you can bring back for your practice squad, because if Peyton Turner gets hurt again, or something happens to one of your other defensive ends, he'd be a great bring up. But other than that, like you said, Lawless was not going to make this team unless something just mind-boggling happened.
Yeah, and Calvin, you're exactly right. He got a lot of coverage sacks. He got a lot of sacks late in the game where he's going up against third teamers. A lot of the guys who got cut today, it just wasn't happening. But it's recency bias. People look at stuff and don't realize the talent level difference that these guys are playing against. They're like, well, look, he's destroying these guys. He must be a great pass rusher. There's a difference between destroying a Calvin Throckmorton or a Jason Kidd versus you're destroying Ryan Ramczyk or Willie Rofer, and that's what you're going to be playing against in the NFL. So that's exactly how I feel. Zach Woods in an empty room right now. He's like, I don't know any of these people.
Right.
He's like the Fresh Prince standing in the empty apartment. Like, I don't know these guys. It's funny. Zach Wood is one of these guys that we kind of went through a cycle of long snappers for a little bit before we got him.
Yeah.
And the only reason why we went through that is because the last long-term long snapper we had sold bogus film credit to his teammates and his head coach. It's funny. But yeah, Zach Wood's just that guy that no one's going to know who he is, but if he screws up, they know who he is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. You're right, Calvin, and a lot of it is you're playing against third teamers. Let's talk about the rookie class. That's the last.
Calvin Lawless got a couple of nice run stops though, where he sliced through a double team, or blew up an edge block. So I mean, that goes both ways too, But irregardless, to Alan's point, he was doing it against guys that are out of a job right now. So you have to take what he did, not with a grain of salt necessarily, but you have to put it in the proper perspective.
Yeah. Exactly. So the last opponent I wanted to talk about tonight is the rookie class. The entire class made this team, which you and I kind of had that feeling. They were all we felt like it was that kind of draft. You touched on it earlier. Salvadori probably had the worst preseason of the entire class. But let's briefly talk about each one. Brian Brzee, that guy. I think he's kind of getting overshadowed a little bit by the fact that Laos is getting these big sacks late in the game, that we're really focused on these new acquisitions. We're paying attention to Peyton Turner. We're looking to see who goes on the other side of Cam Jordan. But Brian Brzee seems to have all the tools for a defensive lineman that he is going to get a lot more playing time than I think anyone expected early in the season. Is that how you feel about him?
Yeah, absolutely. You were on the draft show with Brendan and I. I know the first night. I think the second night too. But we loved the fit of Brzee in this system anyway. And a lot of scouts were saying that, hey, this kid might not have had big numbers at Clemson, but he had a lot going on. If he puts it all together, he has the tools to be a dominant interior presence. And we're seeing flashes of some of that right now. I'm not calling him a Hall of Famer. I'm not calling him a Rookie of the Year. I'm not even calling him a Pro Bowler. But he looks like that he will be making some plays in this rotation. You have to consider, except for Malcolm Roach, the other three defensive tackles are new. You have Brzee, you have Colin Saunders, and you have Nate Shepard. Shepard and Saunders especially, had a very nice preseason too. That trio, along with Roach, who had a very, very good camp. This looks like heads and shoulders above the defensive tackle position that we've seen from this team the last 2 or 3 years. Brzee included. He looks like the kind of guy, Brian does, that he's going to make plays against single team blocking. And if a team is forced to double team him, he cannot, that not only benefits Cam Jordan and the other guys on the outside, but Brzee can hold his own against double teams. He's not going to get blown off of the football, and he's going to occasionally, that spin move he has and that slice, between blockers that he had, those are wicked. Those are the things that put 300-pounders in the face of quarterbacks like that. So, I love what I see from this kid so far.
Malcolm Roach talked about that spin move in the post game after that, and he said it was something that you don't see that too often from a defensive lineman, a defensive tackle. You see it from an edge rusher, but not a defensive tackle that has the guy grabbing at air, and he did. He rolled off that. And that was one of the Texans starters.
Yeah.
The Texans played their starters well into the second quarter because they wanted these guys. You're a bad team. You want these guys to get experience. You don't have the luxury of putting these guys on the bench. So I'm really excited about him. I think he will earn a lot of playing time and be very disruptive in the running game and the passing game. And I think his speed will help against running quarterbacks. Isaiah Foskey, he got credit for a half a sack for that play, or maybe he got credit for a full sack. I don't know what they gave Brzee in that. It doesn't really matter because it doesn't count. But,
right.
That was fans have really been on him because he is not showing out like Brzee. But I've been reminding people, hey, Trey Hendrickson took 4 years to be the player he is. Cam Jordan was terrible his first year. Are you seeing that progression on a Foskey?
Yeah, I am. Listen, I was critical of Foskey after that Kansas City game too. You and I both were. We said that he was playing patty cake along the line of scrimmage. And just seemed to be, inside of his own head. I thought he played noticeably better against the Chargers, and last week or a couple days ago against the Texans, I thought Foskey had as good an outing as any of those defensive linemen. Whether he got credit for the full sack or half sack, I'm not sure either. I do think it was the full sack. I think you're right, Calvin. But he also had three pressures total, counting that sack. He had a run stop for a loss. He played against the run very well. He looks a lot more confident than he did 2 weeks ago, and a lot more decisive. Again, nobody's calling him a Pro Bowler right now, but he looks like he could really be an effective part of the rotation and not be a liability when he's on the field, for 10, 12, 15 snaps per game tops, and that's all you expect from him.
Exactly. I attribute it to paralysis by analysis. I've said this before, but I think he's not thinking as much now. He is actually using his speed and relaxing and making the plays, knowing that, okay, hey, if I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not sure what I'm doing, I know I can rush the passer, but I can only rush the passer at full speed.
Right.
And worst thing could happen is I screw up and leave a cutback lane open if they're not running the football. But as long as I do that, show off my speed, I can maybe make something happen, and that seems to be the approach he took over these last couple of preseason games. I'm going to kind of go out of order, but just because these guys come to mind. Jordan Howden. We've talked very little about Howden, but Howden seems to be the guy they're probably going to go to when the discipline comes down for May went to no contest. How how do you feel about Howden right now
I
as a potential starter?
I agree with you. I think it'll be either Howden or Amati. That'll take May's spot when May is suspended. And I'd be good with either guy. Uh, Howden's played well from the start. Uh, he's had some coverage lapses, which you sort of expect from a rookie. Did not get any help from his fourth, fifth string cornerbacks, guys that are out of a job today. But Howden has an awful lot of versatility back in that secondary. You could see why Dennis Allen loves him, because he's Dennis Allen's type of defensive back. He could play outside corner in a pinch. Not a guy you want out there a lot, but he could play it. Slot corner, deep safety, inside the box. I saw him make three different, standout special teams plays against the Texans. I didn't know a lot about Jordan Howden coming into the draft. It was one of the. I had a good feel for all their draft picks except for him. I had to do a quick film study on him after they picked him, and like I said, I could see just in watching him on film in Minnesota. I came away from that film study saying, I know why Dennis Allen loves him, because he's Dennis Allen's type of defensive back.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned it because he's the versatility, the ability to play multiple positions in his defense, and a defense that requires guys to have that kind of flexibility. We started the show talking about Alontae Taylor playing inside and outside, learning how to play the inside corner position. It's the same thing he sees in Howden. It's not that Taylor has to be out there, but he wants Taylor out there because he's too good of a player not to have him on the field if you're not playing the outside corner. They want him out there for his tackling abilities and intelligence. I see the same thing in Howden, so I'm really excited about him. I expect him to be the guy they're going to go to first when May gets suspended, and he will be suspended 3 games at least.
Yeah.
The DUI, things like that, that's pretty cut and dry. That's like gambling. It's pretty much set in stone. It's not a commissioner's choice like some of these other punishments are. It's set in stone, and I think if whenever they hand out the discipline, it'll probably be next couple of weeks. I'm guessing he'll probably be gone weeks 2 through 4. If I had to take a stab, I don't think he'll be gone week 1, but 2 through 4 I think is possible. Jake, we talked about Salvadori, and I think he's very raw, and you seem to have that same feeling too. Yeah. He's not a bad player, he's just very raw. But let's talk about Haener, because Jake Haener, there was talk for a little while about him maybe supplanting Jameis Winston as the number 2 guy. He's not there yet. No. But what do you like about Jake Haener?
I like his poise in the pocket. I like the fact that when a play does break down, he doesn't panic. He tries, he keeps his composure well, and continues to try to make plays down the field. However, he is smart enough to also take what the defense gives him. He forced the ball a few times against the Texans, but a couple of those throws were late in the game. When you had to force a throw to keep a drive alive. And you also have to keep in mind, and these guys were told this in the locker room undoubtedly before the game. Guys, this is preseason game number 3. It doesn't really matter if we win or lose. So I want you to be aggressive. I want you to take chances. I want to see everything you have. So I'm not worried about the interceptions or inaccuracy a little bit. In a way, the awful play of the offensive line helped us see what Jake Haener, and for that matter, Jameis Winston, had when a play broke down. So if you're going to look at a positive side of a bad performance, from a unit, the piss poor offensive line, allowed us to see a little bit more of Jake Haener, rather than a black and white cookie cutter system type quarterback. I never thought for one second that he had a legitimate shot to displace Jameis Winston as the number 2 quarterback. But I'm glad he gets an opportunity to learn the system from a mental aspect as the third stringer rather than be thrown into the fire this year.
Exactly. I'll tell you the things I liked about Hainer. I liked that when a play broke down, he squared his shoulders up and threw a ball with a lot of zip on it. Mm-hmm. I liked that he audibled. I liked that he had a good command of the verbiage. There was no hesitation on what play they were running or plays where he forgot the motion and things like that. He showed a lot of high football IQ. The audible was impressive to me. I mean, yeah, granted, it's preseason, how much you really audibling, but you compare him to a Garrett Grayson or Sean Canfield or, some of these other guys they brought in, Ian Book. He didn't look like any of those guys. He looked like a guy. He looked closer to what's his name? I just saw him a second ago behind me on the screen. But number 15, 2 years ago, Trevor Siemian. Yeah. He looked more like a Trevor Siemian out there as far as his awareness than some of these other guys, these other rookies they brought in. He's got a learning curve to go through. Mm-hmm. He's also very small, but I like what I see for him. Maybe his ceiling is a backup only. That's not bad.
No.
Considering the Saints draft history of quarterbacks, that's not bad. Calvin posted the joke. Rumor has it Hayner's still throwing to Krull. I think that's the only guy he trusted out there, honestly. And that's why he kept forcing the ball into him. But overall, I enjoyed watching him play because it didn't feel like you were watching a guy like, how much longer is this game going to be on? I mean, my God.
Right.
This is so bad to watch because he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He's taking stupid sacks. So, yeah, I'm excited for this kid. So, the final pick, we've talked a lot about him already, but he made the roster, A.T. Perry. What do you think of A.T. Perry? Do you think he's actually going to contribute this year, or is he going to be that guy who's going to be inactive most games? How do you see A.T. Perry fitting in this offense?
Assuming Rashid Shaheed's hamstring is going to be properly healed by season opener, and we think it will be, it wouldn't surprise me if A.T. Perry was a game day inactive for the first couple of weeks. But I think that this guy has a legitimate ceiling as a contributor. Certainly a fourth receiver. Maybe even a number 3 wide out with the upside of a 2. If you guys follow, Alan, Brendan, and myself on, through our draft coverage, that I was calling for A.T. Perry from the 3rd round on. I'm that high on this guy. I watched that much of him in college, and I loved what I see, what I saw from him. Progression and development wise through training. He had a rough start to camp. Dropping a lot of balls, things like that. He really, really pulled it together. I love his route running. He's physical in traffic, but has the athleticism to separate. I think they like Keith Kirkwood as their number 4 if Rashid is healthy. But A.T. Perry has the physical ability to relatively quickly surpass Kirkwood. And it would not be surprising if by mid-season that A.T. Perry was their solid number 4 guy.
And I'm glad you said that because that's exactly how I feel about him. He took a Marcus Colston sort of like journey. He's not at Colston's level, but he's taken that Colston journey as far as Colston was terrible in minicamp, terrible at the OTAs. Came back for training camp and got himself in position to become a great player. A.T. Perry has that potential. He's just a little further behind Colston, but I would not be surprised to see him heavily in the mix as the season progresses. And it's just one more passing weapon. You can't coach height. You can't coach the boxing out, which he can do. He just needs to be more aggressive in the contested catches, but I think he can do that too. It's just getting used to the speed of the NFL. We completely skipped over Miller. We completely skipped over Miller. we. I mean, there's what can we say about Miller? We've said most of it. I've seen some stupid shit on Twitter where they were trying to say that Merriweather outplayed Miller and stupid crap like that. But I mean, Miller's the real deal. This is
Yes.
why we got him, and I think a lot of people are just mad we didn't get Spears still.
Yeah.
Tajah Spears, who is having a good season preseason with Tennessee, but I think Miller is everything you want in a back right now.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, he is. Like we talked about with the quarterback, Hayner and Winston at quarterback. Neither Merriweather or Miller had even a semblance of blocking in front of them. Yet from both backs, I saw real decisive decision making, solid vision, good burst when there was a crease, and good receiving ability out of both backs. But Merriweather did not outplay Miller. With Miller, you saw, Merriweather, in my opinion, played his way into a chance on an NFL roster, whether it's with the Saints or someone else. But Miller just has the kind of explosiveness, an open field ability and playmaking ability that you can't teach. It's innate. We saw that wheel route against the Chargers. Granted, it was a great throw from Winston, but Kamara himself could not have run a better pass route, than that. And again, I'll harken back to our draft coverage. We talked about Kendre Miller, when they made the pick, and all three of us. I watched a lot of Kendre at TCU. A lot of us did. You couldn't get caught up in the fact that Kendre Miller didn't catch a lot of passes at TCU because they just didn't throw him a lot. When he was thrown to, he showed good hands. He showed good route running ability, and excellent. Excellent catch to run conversion, and we have seen all that so far. Albeit in a brief preseason stint. It wouldn't surprise me if, depending on the situation of the game, that Kendre Miller made more big plays for the Saints than Jamal Williams before Alvin Kamara returned.
I'm glad you said that because I feel the same way. I think part of the reason they felt comfortable letting Darrell Williams go is because they felt like, you know what, we got two good running backs right here with Miller and Williams. We don't necessarily have to have a third back. We can, if we need a short yardage guy, we can go to Taysom. In those situations. So, I think Merriweather comes back. I'm curious to see if they try him as a returner. I think maybe Bowden comes back. I don't know. I still don't know where that is coming from, but I think Miller has solidified his position that they would feel comfortable going with Williams and Miller as the primary backs during these 3 games until Kamara comes back. That's just my gut feeling right now. That could change in the next few days. We'll talk about that next week when we preview the Titans game. I kept you 15 minutes longer than I planned. Tell me real quick about the Bayou Blitz. I'm sorry about that, but tell me real quick about the Bayou Blitz.
You're killing me. I'm going to keel over on a live broadcast.
I know.
Bayou Blitz tomorrow. Brandon and I have a big announcement, which I would love to clue you in on, but I can't. I'm not allowed. And practice squads. The Saints will have to field a 16 member practice squad. We don't know whether all 16 players will be filled out by showtime, but we know we'll at least have a few players that we'll be able to talk about. And we'll have a little bit more clarification, like Alan said earlier tonight. Over the next 24 to 48 hours, roster spots will become open because Kamara will be placed officially on the suspended list, and other injured players, what's going to become of them. So, we'll, possibly by tomorrow, we'll find out some of those lies. But hopefully we'll have a little bit more roster clarification tomorrow too by Bayou Blitz time.
Yeah, I really was gunning to have the talk about the draft picks at 15 till and it ended up being 5 till. I apologize again. Thank you guys for sticking with us. Thank you, Bob, for keeping your eyes open long enough to go through this. I know it's 10:35 your time, so I appreciate it as always. You take the time to be with us. Next week, it's beginning of the season. We do our preview of the Saints-Titans game, and the regular season's here. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.